There we go.
Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Badass Marketing. Once again, I am joined by the ever so lovely Angela Duns. Angela, how are you?
It was a little bit of a challenging week this week, and I think that that's going around with a lot of other people. I heard that from my clients too, but we made it.
There you go. It's Friday somewhere in California. Lord knows what day you'll see this, but it's Friday. So we're in Friday mode. It's the middle of the summer. The weather is great. And what are we talking about today?
We are going to be talking about client personas and target audience and how that affects the marketing that you do.
Why do we need that? We could just sell to everybody, right?
Ooh, I'll tell you, it's always been an adage to say if you're selling to everyone, you're selling to no one. And I think that that has really gotten polarized and really finely focused in the last couple of years. Personalization is everything. If you're not talking to me, I am not listening. And so I really think that we need to get very serious and very, very focused about what situation our prospects are in and how we can help them exactly and how we're different from the market.
So how do we go about that?
um, well, we've talked a lot on this podcast about market research and talking to your clients and really getting to know, because I really think that during the pandemic, a lot of our clients' needs have shifted and changed completely in some situations. So if we're still trying to solve some of the old problems, and those are the solutions that we have to offer, we probably need to get in touch with our ideal clients and find out if we're missing the mark or if we need to tweak just a teeny bit to make it a better fit. But I really think that market research is something that should be done. And who knows, as much as things have shifted these days, there may be new markets for us to break into.
Maybe like AI. I
And
hear that's
AI
new. I hear it's going to be big.
And, AI could be used as a tool for this. It can help you find out who needs the specific solutions that you have and build some of your buyer personas.
Yeah, I mean, the only my reaction to that was like, oh God, no. But yes, but with a caveat, and the I think the most important thing about buyer personas is genuinely talking to your prospects, because so many businesses are launched on a good idea or what is perceived as a good idea without ever going out
Yeah.
and talking to people. And AI is a very powerful tool. Obviously, we're using it. We love it. But that would be the case where I wouldn't want to start with AI. I want to go out unbiased and say, hey, what's going on? Tell me what are your unmet needs. Because we're very opposed to creating some brilliant solution that we think is just the best thing since sliced bread, and then trying to go out to the market and like, hey, do you want this? And they're like, no, I never asked for that. So I would caution, especially with the AI aspect, AI will help you develop questions, it'll help you develop sort of outlines for personas, but do not, you know, forget that you actually should go out and talk to people to genuinely get their input. And most importantly, listen to what they're
Yes.
telling you.
Yeah.
Um, Ideally, you do this before you even build your product or your solution. Uh,
Yes.
that you go out and like, hey, what's going on? What do you need? What's your unmet need? So I agree, AI is a powerful tool. I agree it can assist you in this process, but please, please, please do not do that in replace of actually speaking to people.
Yes. And a reason why that's so important is how do we make buying decisions? They're based on emotion, and AI cannot mimic that at all. So you really need to get in what is the emotional challenge? What is the emotional feeling that people have where you can provide a solution for whatever that is. What are they worrying about? What's keeping them up at night? What, like you said, their unmet needs. What are your unmet needs that are like the top of your list?
And even within, a very niche market, you will have different buyer personas that will have completely different needs. And if you go to AI, it's going to generalize your market, which is fine. It's going to give you sort of broad overview. But if you really need to drill down at the micro level of, what does this type of client need? We really need to get out there and talk to them. We have in the past, and we will continue to probably do it in the future. When we talk about this, one of the examples that we use is kitchen remodeling, right? We use this as sort of a an explanation as to, so kitchen remodeling for all practical purposes is a very niche market, right? And if you
Yes.
ask AI, what do you think it's going to tell you that your buyer persona is? Somebody who wants a new kitchen.
Yes.
But we're going to argue that, within that small niche, I'm sure it's a big industry, but, this is a very sort of, specific niche, kitchen remodeling. You have many different types of buyer personas. And, we look at, for example, when we do this exercise, we look at 3 personas: a family, with 2 or 3 kids, and what are their needs, versus an elderly adult living at home alone, and what is that person's need. And then, the 20 or 30-year-old couple that, single, no kids, probably eats out 90% of the time because of work or what have you. Right. So those are 3 profiles that I can tell you have very specific needs that if you look at them, they're not related at all. Yes, they're looking for a new
Yes.
kitchen, but they're looking for very different things in that new kitchen.
Right.
The family is looking for convenience, it's looking for storage, it is going to probably spend a huge amount of time in the kitchen.
Multi-use space.
Multi-use space. Whereas, the couple that's, has no kids, working long hours, they're likely, they might make coffee in the kitchen.
Coffee. Yes.
Right? Like the only thing the kitchen remodel needs is a coffee maker. And then you get into the elderly person where, this is about accessibility. Can they reach things? If you put things up too high, we don't want them stretching. We don't want them climbing up on stools or anything to reach things. So we want to make sure that everything's accessible. We want to make sure that, while they probably will use their kitchen, it's going to be minimal because they're probably cooking for one. So, this design is going to be different than the other 2. So it's really important to understand that even within a niche market, there's the potential for different buyers and different buyer personas as to what their needs are.
Right. Right.
And then once you define these buyer personas, your target audience, you're like, the people who make coffee, they don't spend enough money in remodeling because it's not a priority, so they may not be our target audience. So once you've created this personas, you can then figure out, if which personas are best for your business or your type of business, and that will get into your target audience. Like, we do kitchen remodeling, but we're really going to focus on growing families because they have big needs and are more likely to spend than the couple that doesn't really use their kitchen all that much.
Right. Except for the wine cooler.
And the coffee maker. Don't forget the
Yes.
coffee maker, for God's sakes.
Yes. Yes. So, yeah, and and there are preferences inside of there as well. Not just is it a big enough market, but what is the kind of work that you really excel at? How can you meet the needs of a different niche inside the market?
Right.
I have
And
no.
that,
Go ahead.
right. And that comes down to the idea of don't develop your solution until after you have an understanding of what the unmet needs are. You can bring your expertise to that solution and say, hey, we're really good at this, and therefore we should target this group of people.
And then the languaging has to fit that niche as well. I mean, the way you'd talk to a single elderly person is very different than the way you'd speak to a family about what their needs and wants are inside that kitchen. So you really have to be aware, you have to meet them where they're at, so that you gain some trust and can get some great information out of them about what their needs are.
And and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, this idea of the emotional buyer. What are the emotions that you want to tap into when selling to these different groups? So with the elderly person, you want them to feel safe. You want them to feel comfortable in the kitchen without any risks, because we don't want the risk of falling, we don't want the risk of hurting themselves. So emotionally, they want to feel comfortable and safe in their kitchen, right? Most across the board, all of them are going to want some form of functionality within the kitchen design, so that it improves whatever they currently have. And that's really important too when you're talking to them, to listen to how they phrase things, because that will begin to unveil the emotional aspects that they're focused on. Many people say, yeah, I want a kitchen cabinet with 4 doors and a snap, but that's not what they tell you. What they tell you is, here's what I want. I want the kitchen to be the center of my home. I want it to be welcoming. I want it to be right. And those are emotions and feelings, right? Like, okay, make my kitchen welcoming. Like, how do you define that? But you're listening to the fact that this is what they want, right? So when you're marketing to them, what we want is to tap into the very language that they are using to identify their needs.
And for the couple with the kids, it's a huge disruption for them to go through, because they are using their kitchen. So the timeline is something that will be very important about that. You'd need to be very clear and set up expectations for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this will just be very disruptive depending on how long it lasts. But what's interesting is there'll be a baseline of functionality. But when people are looking, and particularly when you're trying to market to them, is tapping into the emotions. The family with the kid is focused on family, focused on creating a home, creating a welcoming space. I think you mentioned it's multi-use. So this is where they're doing their homework. This is where they're having dinner every evening. This is where I love this. I was going to say this is where they read the newspaper, but maybe this is where they browse on their smartphone. So it's reading the
Yes,
newspaper is probably gone by now. That for most people.
I'm old school. I still love getting the newspaper.
Do you? Do you really?
Yes, I love getting the Chronicle
I
paper
like
form.
the newspaper, but I don't, because the thing about the newspaper for me, and this is truly off topic, but the frustration with me is when I get the newspaper, I realize I've read everything 24 hours before online. So somewhere along the line, I realized I'm like, okay,
Oh, yes, the
because
information
I read,
age.
I'm online all day long, so it's inevitable that anything of any significance I've probably
Yes,
read online.
yes, whether you want to know it or not, it's in your face.
Yeah, so sadly, I don't read the newspaper anymore. But it's interesting because if you don't know me, or you're about to learn more about me, we have dogs. So I take the dogs for walks in the neighborhood, and then we get to sort of get a sense of what's going on. And I would say about 25% of our neighbors still get the newspaper. It's a local paper, has local news. But I find that interesting that it's still a significant amount of people who still, or at least get the newspaper. I don't know what they do with it. We use it for doggy bags, but I'm assuming other people
Fire
actually read.
fireplace.
Right. Fodder for the fireplace, exactly.
Yeah, no, I do Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that satisfies my need.
So where do we begin? So when we're creating a persona, where do we begin?
I like to start with the situation. What is the situation where they finally decide I have to do something about this? The trigger point that, what is the problem that they can't move forward without solving this problem? That's, for me, that's a great place to start.
Okay, and then where So do you make an assumption going into this that, or do you try to be as neutral as possible?
When I'm in a coffee chat with somebody who I think is a prospect, I usually will ask them a couple of questions. One of them is going to be, what have you tried in the past? And why didn't it work? And I'm going to ask them why now and why LinkedIn? And, you know, what is your major goal? If LinkedIn worked perfectly for you, what would it do for your business development?
And but I want to take you a step further back because you're sort of talking about someone who's already self-identified that they have an interest in your services. Okay.
Yes.
So let's go even further back, right? How did you determine that there was an unmet need around LinkedIn?
For me, what I do is very intimate. So a lot of times it's going to be somebody has seen me speak somewhere and they send me an email or a message on LinkedIn and says, something that you said really hit me. I'd like to have a further conversation with you.
Okay, I'm gonna go back again if I can, um, because when you were preparing that speech to an audience that you don't know who's out there listening to you, right? What were you thinking when it comes to the idea of like, what do I need to convey to this audience to begin to attract clients? Because you're talking about like once you've attracted them, you go through the process of understanding their needs. But I'm saying go back even further, right? When you're thinking that like someone's like, come speak to us, and you're like, okay, I'll speak to you because I want to generate new business. How do you determine the topic that you think is going to resonate with a group of people that you have not yet met?
Well, I try to ask as many questions of whoever the organizer is for the talk, but it really comes down to almost exactly the same thing every single time. Most people have not paid a lot of attention to LinkedIn. And so the personal branding is usually the first thing that I hit on. So if somebody looks at your profile, are they impressed or are they repelled? They're like, yeah, next. Or this is really a professional person. And when I start talking about that, it really hits a nerve with a lot of people because they're very judgy about other people's profiles, but they've never really taken a discriminating look at their own.
And at the risk of being difficult, which I can be,
And please do.
um, you had said, whether a profile is good or bad or stuff like that. What do you believe the people that are open to listening to your messages, what is their unmet need? What is, I'm going to do the five whys or
Great.
fishbone or whatever you want to call it. What is the unmet need that makes them, receptive to the idea of engaging with somebody who specializes in LinkedIn?
They know that they need to bring in more business. They've possibly heard other people say, oh, I get business from LinkedIn. They think that it's possible for them to get business from LinkedIn, but they don't know how to get started.
Okay, so the unmet need is this, they're not, they have a need to generate more business and they're not. So they don't particularly know where to start. So the unmet need, just so that we can define this, is that, if they didn't have the need to develop more business, they wouldn't be bothering with you.
Right.
So there's a need. So, and I think it's important that when you're looking at personas, that you make sure that you're looking at what is the need, because we want to respond to that need, whether it's emotional or actual or whatever it might be, is to understand the need because otherwise, if I don't have the need for someone to help me with my LinkedIn profile, I don't care how wonderful your presentations are, it's not going to resonate. Like, I don't need that. You know what I
You're
mean?
not going to
Which is
spend the
why we don't
money.
want to sell to everybody, because not everybody has that need.
Right. Right. And so usually the second topic that I cover is the business development piece and what's possible there, the relationship building, the referral marketing, that sort of thing. And then the final piece that I always present is visibility. And between those three, many times it will spark something inside somebody. And that's how I get inquiries. So some of the needs are, it all boils down to business development, whether it's visibility or relationship building, referral marketing, a lot of things that we've talked about in this podcast.
So I'm going to walk through a couple aspects and sort of maybe try to frame what we're talking about. So first, we talked about an unmet need. So this is a group of people that have the need to develop business via LinkedIn or develop business in general and see LinkedIn as a potential tool, right?
Yes.
So take that group and then begin to define them as a potential target audience, right? So I'm going to be so bold as to tell you, or my perception of the target audience, which is these are typically equity partners within organizations that have a high ticket business development responsibility. Is that a safe assumption?
That is a safe assumption.
Okay, so then we have your target audience, right? Then within that niche, we have different types of equity partners, such as law firms, accounting firms,
Wealth
wealth managers,
managers.
right? So then you begin to, and then what, so we have this target audience. Now we have specifics within that target audience from which to build buyer personas, because the equity partner in a law firm might have different needs than the solo entrepreneur equity partner in a equity person, because they're probably not a partnership if there's a solo. Sorry. Will have different needs than the wealth manager, financial planner. So they have different needs. So
Yes.
what we would then begin to do is create a buyer persona for wealth managers. We would get a buyer persona for the law firms. Am I on the right track?
You are on the right track. And CPAs is the other audience, and all three of these audiences also have huge problems with compliance. And time is a huge issue for them.
But you can see where we start with an unmet need, right? We make a general target audience, which is these equity partners. And then that allows us to identify who they are. And then we can begin to create buyer personas for the different segments within that target audience, right? Because we do understand
Yes.
CPAs will have different needs than lawyers will have different needs than financial planners. So this is sort of the process that we would work through when we're trying to understand and define who our potential audience is. And then when we have this dialogue, what do the CPAs tell you they're looking for?
The CPAs are trying to develop business, but one of their major concerns is the compliance issue. They're very conscientious about that. And they really don't have a lot of time to work on it. So the more done for you I can offer for them, they don't feel comfortable writing. They don't. They're like, you need to write my about section for me, Angela. But it needs to sound like them. So they have very specific needs. They don't feel confident in marketing or writing or coming up with the kinds of phrases that are going to work on a public platform like that. And they're very concerned about compliance.
So when you're looking at the buyer persona, are they introverts?
They are definitely introverts. Yeah, CPAs for sure. I think attorneys are almost exactly the opposite.
Yeah, they're not usually introverts. Yeah. But you can begin to see that as you're building this persona, like, okay, this is a group of introverts, right? So
Yes.
introverts do not like to be pushed outside of their comfort zone.
Nope.
Right. So we want to make sure that we respect their comfort zone, which is very different than the other buyer persona being a lawyer who, many of them are extroverts and, are more than comfortable. So when we're building the persona, for the CPA, you're like, they're introverts. They don't want to be the center of attention. They want to focus on helping you be compliant, helping you, making sure that, you do it right. because when we go to a CPA and we go to those folks, what we're looking for is, if we could do it ourselves, we would, but we know, we don't want to risk an audit. We don't want to risk getting sideways with the IRS. So we're really focused on hiring these people to make sure that we are compliant. Been in many positions where we've worked with CPAs. We want to make sure we get through the audit okay. So we were going to work with them throughout the year to ensure that we're keeping our books right, and that we will they'll prepare our monthly statements or they'll review our monthly statements to make sure that we're in compliance, to make sure that that we're documenting and capturing information so that in the event of an audit, we can basically minimize any impact of an audit because we have all our information and it's all available. I remember I worked for a big finance firm as the CFO, and we had a huge audit, and like we wrapped it up in a day, and like the auditor was like, that's the fastest I've ever done that, and they didn't have any issues, and they were frustrated they couldn't find an issue, right? Because they're like, there must be something here. But we were meticulous when it came to documentation and about and then we had worked with our CPA throughout the year to double check and check to make sure that everything was
ideal client right there.
right.
Ideal.
So, our CPA loved us. The auditor was frustrated because they're like, there must be something here. Like, give us something. I'm like, nope. But so that's what we're trying to convey when we're working with CPAs is this. It's a group of introverts, but they are heavily relied on for compliance and heavily relied on for making sure that we don't get ourselves in trouble, especially as business owners. And in our messaging, obviously, that's something that when we're working on their personas and working on their marketing, we want to convey, this idea of you can trust us, you can rely on us, we'll be there to support you if you get audited, all those types of things, right?
Yes.
And that's a very different profile or business persona than maybe the wealth manager, who is about, either we're going to grow your wealth or we're going to preserve it, depending on where you are in your life or what have you, right? Some people, the older we get, the less risk we become more risk averse. So we want to save what we have versus, growing it. In our 20s and 30s, we're trying to grow wealth. As we get older, hopefully, if we've achieved any, we want to make sure we don't lose it, or that we can pass it on to the next generation.
Legacy, yes, yes.
And that's
but very different personalities,
right? And that's where, but they all fall under your target audience, and therefore we need to understand from a buyer persona perspective the differences between those groups so that we can resonate with those groups when we're trying to work with them.
And they have very different concerns, very different language that they use.
And the other thing that I think is important as marketers, they have very specific languages, but it tends to be industry specific, right?
Yes.
And it's language that the layperson doesn't respond to, right? So we need to help them convert their industry specific type of jargon into to match the concerns of their potential audience, so that it doesn't get lost in the industry jargon.
Yeah, and sometimes those are difficult conversations, but they're absolutely necessary. You have to go there,
right? But this is, as you can sort of see, we started at the top, right? Sort of defined this unmet need, and the unmet need allowed us to develop a target audience, and the target audience then allows us to further break that down into buyer personas. And then once we have this information, we have the emotions, we have the particular wording that they use and that they're familiar with, so that we can incorporate that back into the messaging and back into the marketing to attract new clients.
Yes. Yeah.
And then
super.
You mentioned that, let's take the CPAs, for example. They want you to do it all. Like, they don't want to do it themselves. So I'm guessing that somewhere in your marketing is, we will take care of it for you.
Yes. Yeah. I'm getting there. I'm really and it's interesting because the wealth managers and the attorneys want the same thing for different reasons.
Right. But you respond to that need or that desire
Yes.
to have that
Yep.
in your marketing, saying, we will take care of it for you, we will do it for you, right?
Yes.
um, a lot of what we tell our clients is, we'll sweat the details so you don't have to. We'll worry about it. Let us worry about it. We'll take care of it. You know, our happiest clients are the clients that don't ever talk to us, right? Because they know us and they trust us, and they're like, just go do it.
It's a done deal.
And they don't have to get
Mike's
involved.
taking care of it.
It's like one less thing on their to-do list is because
Yes.
we handle their marketing and thing. They know that that piece is taken care of. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So,
Which is fantastic. So, any parting thoughts, any parting advice that you want to give our audience about target audience?
yeah, I mean, I'm going to just, sadly, I'm going to recap with start with their needs, right? If you have a product now that you're trying to sell, okay, so we would have preferred that you develop the solution after you'd spoken to them, but we realize that probably, that ship has probably already sailed. But make sure that you go out and talk to real people, because what happens is a lot of us come up with some really brilliant ideas for business, and this just run into the market trying to, like, we're ready, we're going to take this on, without ever talking to anybody. And go out and talk to people, go out and get their input, and make this a part of your culture to continue to talk to your people. I actually think that, like, one of the best areas to get feedback about your business is the people that are pissed off at you, right? Because there's
Yes.
something that you're doing that is not making them happy. And I'm not suggesting that the customer is always right, because no, they're not. They're not always right. But that messaging and that sort of, idea of, like, they're not happy, we need to figure out what's going on there. It could be simply they're a mismatch, right? It wasn't the type of client we should have had. It wasn't the type of client that we should engage with. But if we realize this is the type of client that we're supposed to have, and this is the type of client we want to work with, then we have to figure out where the disconnect was. And the best place to look for disconnects is what they're bitching about. Because, it's like, you don't get back to me fast enough, I can't reach you. These are things that they care about. So for us, continue to have the dialogue, continue to actually generally talk to people. I love AI. I produce content with AI. I love it. But don't, like, so people are like, oh, you're going to lose your jobs to AI, right? AI is not going to go talk to your customers. AI is not going to listen to your customers. Even more
Yes.
importantly, AI is not going to listen to your customers. So if you want to stand out, if you really want to connect with your clients, AI is a nice tool to leverage, but it'll never do that. If you go
Right.
talk to your clients, if you, get in front of them and say, hey, what's going on? And just stop right there. Don't ask anything else. Don't tell them what you're selling. Don't give them a solution. Just, like, what's going on, and let them be heard. First of all, no one ever does that, because, and we've had conversations about customer service and the fact that it doesn't exist. But if you go out and you talk to these people and you generally listen to what they're dealing with and what they need, they will come up with their own solution, and all you have to do is provide it for
And that right there is some differentiation.
them. And it's personalized because it's something that they generally care about. This is what keeps me up at night. This is why my business isn't growing. This is, and the list goes on and on. But if you can listen to that and respond to that with a solution that addresses that obviously adds value to their business, you don't even have to sell. You know what I mean? And if you do a really good job, they're going to refer other people to you, which is just, like, it doesn't get any better than that. I was working on something yesterday around referral marketing, and 85% of buyers buy based on a referral, right?
That's a
So
pretty, you cannot ignore that statistic.
that word of mouth referral, that's a huge number, right? So we turn to people like, I needed an accountant. Who do you know, right? What's been your experience? So if you can make your customer happy, and someone asks them, who do you work with, they're going to refer you. And it doesn't get a warmer lead than that, than a satisfied customer referring you to somebody that knows them and trusts them for that referral. So,
Right.
you know, listen to your customers, listen to what they need versus what you're trying to sell them. If your solution matches, perfect. If your solution doesn't match and you can, modify it so it meets their specific needs, good. If it doesn't match at all, then like, hey, that's not us. We, either we're going to refer you to somebody else, or sorry, but that's just not us. And you should keep on looking. But, figure out what they're looking for versus what you're trying to sell them.
Right. Right. And be
And what
okay with
parting
that if you're
shots do you
not the
have?
good fit. Um, Personalization. I mean, really be aware of, even though you have these beautiful buyer personas that are really specific, that's great. Just be really aware of the person that's in front of you right now. You know, if you're having a one-on-one conversation, even in networking or a discovery call, you know, they may not fit that persona exactly. Find out what's going on with them.
Well, and the other thing, and I think you've alluded to this, is, these need to be living documents, right? Because things change. A buyer persona that was created pre-COVID, before work at
Yep.
home, is not going to be relevant today. So these buyer personas need to be updated. You need to go back out and talk to them as, on a regular basis. I don't, you guys can define what regular means, whether that's quarterly, annually, whatever it is. But you need to make sure that these profiles are current, because
Yes.
situations change. People work from home. The downtown has changed. And if your buyer personas are based on something 5 years ago, yeah, it's probably not going to be relevant.
No. And one thing that I've learned is sometimes you don't know what your ideal client is until you meet them. And that can change a lot of things very instantly. Once you find that buyer, that's just like everything works out great. They are ideal to work with for a lot of different reasons. And go find more of them.
Right. Right, exactly. If you can find them or ask them, like, who else do you know that would benefit from
Yes.
this? If you don't ask, you won't get the referral. If you
Right.
ask, you might get the referral. We can't guarantee you'll get the referral, but I can tell you it gets much better if you actually ask for the referral.
Yes. Yes, for sure. And we talked
Well,
about that
Angela,
last time, didn't we?
yeah, we did. So, what are we going to talk about next time? What's our
Oh
next
boy.
topic?
Um, let's talk about content a little bit. I don't think we've really talked too much about content. So how often, what kind, what mix, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I can summarize that, but we could talk about that, but like all the time, more, never enough.
Let's get into some specifics with really good content strategy, and we can get into the platforms a little bit too.
Sure, sure.
And that will be based on your buyer persona. Where are they?
Right. So, well, we hope you liked this discussion. We hope it provided some insights, maybe some little actionable things to take on. We talked about unmet needs, creating a target audience, and then further defining that target audience by creating buyer personas. So we hope we found this helpful. If so, please like this, share your comments, share your questions, tell us how much you hate us, whatever it is. We don't care. We just want your feedback. Share it below. And we look forward to talking to you next time, and we will be talking about content. Angela, I hope you have a great week. Look forward to seeing you next week.
You too. Take care, Mike. Take care, everyone.
Bye.